We welcome everybody to the 2019 Trails and Treats presented by the Fort Worth Nature Center in relationship to our Lake Worth Monster Bash. First presenter today is Rob Denkhaus. His subject is the ecology of the Lake Worth monster. In short, at this point, he's a wildlife biologist and the manager of our 3,600 acre plus nature center up here in Fort Worth. It's operated by the Parks Department of the City of Fort Worth. He's previously worked in the nature centers, zoos, and other nature-based facilities in Wisconsin, Ohio, Indiana, and Tennessee. His wildlife research interests include bison, American alligators, wild hogs, feral cats, and native Mesio carnivores, all of which share sometimes an antagonistic relationship with humans. The Lake Worth monster is a special species of interest. So, Rob, it's all yours.
Thank you, sir. Sorry for the long-winded bio because the person in charge of it didn't ask me for one specifically, just grabbed one they found from another presentation. But I have to admit, putting together this presentation has been one of my greatest professional challenges. I work for the City of Fort Worth. We have City of Fort Worth template on our PowerPoint here and everything. And they preach to us that you can only give fact. You cannot give supposition. You cannot give opinion. You have to be able to present data. And so this topic gives me a somewhat reason to pause in terms of that, of being able to present hard facts on the ecology of the Lake Worth monster. So to abide by my city training, I'd like to thank all of you for coming to our presentation today, and if you have any questions. But if I take off my city uniform, and I add one word, this makes me a little bit more comfortable. I can abide by this. I can talk about theory. So, we're going to make some assumptions, because we have a very deep subject to get into, and we can't talk about every little tidbit of detail that's out there. But let's talk about some assumptions that I've used to develop this idea of the ecology of the Lake Worth monster. We're going to assume that the Lake Worth monster is a Bigfoot or similar type creature. It's an unknown animal, natural animal. We're not going to go into paranormal. We're not going to go into aliens. We're not going to talk about any of those things. Wikipedia gives us a description of Bigfoot or Sasquatch are said to be hairy, upright, walking, ape-like creatures, dwell in the wilderness and leave footprints. Depictions often portray them as a missing link between humans and human ancestors or other great apes, and I do not want to get into where this creature falls in that spectrum between apes and humans. But I would like to assume that they are large bipedal mammals, most likely within the order primates. If you study mammalogy and you look at the characteristics of the various orders, the physical traits that are reported lean closest to the primates. We're also going to make one more assumption here, in that the majority of reports of visual or auditory encounters and other alleged evidence are true, to the best of the witness's ability to determine. Basically, I'm going to make a broad assumption that, except for some specific instances, that we can believe what we're told or what we read. Without that, then everything gets called into question. This assumption includes the events of 1969 that took place here at the Nature Center. So let's go into the ecology of Bigfoot, of the Lake Worth monster. And by the way, how many folks are longtime Fort Worth residents? I mean, we're talking a long time now, because I see some of you that don't even alive long enough ago for me to talk about this particular one. We're talking the 40s. I personally do not like the phrase Lake Worth monster, because that name was stolen from a 1940s episode that took place on Lake Worth, and it was more of a Loch Ness type creature, and that was proven to be a hoax. And so I prefer Goatman to Lake Worth Monster, just because it's his own name. It was given to him instead of borrowing somebody else's. But when we look at Goatman, Bigfoot, whatever we want to call them, their habitats, highly, highly diverse. We've got a vast array of habitats used. Our 1969 sightings here on the refuge spanned the vast majority of our 3,600 acres, which granted back in 1969, only about 2,700 acres was considered to be the nature center at that time. But those sightings occurred in wetlands. They occurred in upland forests. They occurred in the prairies. So just off those notes, we say that Goatman or Bigfoot is a habitat generalist. And then you look at it nationwide, the mature coniferous forests of the Pacific Northwest, the mixed forest, hardwoods and conifers of East Texas, the hardwood forest of New England. Go into the Midwest, you have the riparian forest that follows all of the water courses and mixed in with cropland. And then you can even get into the desert Southwest and the scrublands, and there are reports from that area. So when you put that all together, you can really make a statement that it says that it appears, for me as a biologist looking at this, that this creature requires the vertical stratification of forest systems to provide cover or shelter. Makes basic sense. It also appears that the creature prefers or requires access to bodies of water, and I'm not talking about just being able to drink water occasionally, but it certainly seems that most encounters are associated with water in some way within some relatively short distance for a mobile creature, and that they do require dense cover for travel lanes. And the travel lanes is becoming more important. Now, I will admit, I am a wildlife biologist, and so by profession, I should not be up here talking about this. Because my professional colleagues, this is hokum. And I will admit that growing up in Ohio in the 60s and 70s, I heard things. I've always been interested, and I've read all of the reports I could get my hands on over the years. But growing up in Ohio at that time period, we had Patty in the Northwest, and the general idea that, well, that's only out there. So it was not. I didn't make any connection really until maybe 20 years ago. But the range and distribution, as more and more people are encountering and reporting this, we're realizing that these are not a localized creature. And so we have a range that spans the nature center, that spans the state of Texas, it spans the United States, it spans the North American continent, and basically spans the world if you want to make all the greater connections out there to other encounters with cryptic creatures. So we have them scattered everywhere. But how do they get there? And why do we keep finding or having reports coming from places that the average person would go, no way in hell could you have something like this creature living in Tarrant County? Now we are kind of out here on the fringe, and we do have a big chunk of land. But if you pay attention to the reports that are out there, there is becoming a more urbanized, if you will, trend on the reports. Now, is it because of a lack of land, available land? They getting forced out of areas? Possibly. But is it because they always were there and they could utilize the resources in those areas? And then our modern way of developing cities, we call them green belts today, but we try to make all of our urban areas interlaced with a network of travel lanes for wildlife. If we just take a step back from the cryptids here, and you look at known wildlife species, this is how known wildlife is becoming more and more prevalent in the urban environment. For those of us of, the late baby boomer generation and beyond, do you remember back in the day, you would never think about coyotes or bobcats being in an urban environment. But you would think of rats and pigeons and things like that. But today we have those bobcats and coyotes. We have more deer in urban environments, denser populations of deer in urban environments that are found in the wild, in rural areas. Why is that? It's because the habitat is available and the animals adapt to available habitat, to utilize resources that are available. Why couldn't this cryptic creature do the same? The proximity to human development idea is just expounding upon what I've been describing, that we provide, say for coyotes, in our urban and suburban environments, we provide new food sources. Anthropogenic foods is what it's called in the wildlife profession. Human provided foods, and in the form of garbage and bird feeders and people that actually leave food out for wildlife, or even as simple as leaving the bowl of dog food on the back porch for your dog to come and go, or cat food. Feeds many, many known creatures. What's to say that these cryptic creatures have not also taken advantage of those anthropogenic food sources? And if you look, we do have reports of them frequently using dumpsters, trash cans, and the like. They're not afraid of the human interface. They're just cautious in the way they use it. If you look at the food habits, I think in my own beginnings of my own interest in this topic, it just seemed logical that they would be herbivores, frugivores, eating vegetation and fruits, nuts, those kind of things. And there certainly are many, many reports of that. Foraging for roots, digging in the ground to pull up the roots and bulbs and corms and things. Eating fruit, gathering apples out of a tree or shaking the tree to get the apples to the ground so they can gather them up. Out in the cornfields of the Midwest. And that's very common in the primate world. If you go to look at Africa and Asia, some of the areas where they have a lot of agriculture, in particular the primates that are resident in those areas, native to those areas, do the same thing. So why wouldn't this one? Primates are also, some of them, are opportunistic carnivores. And reports indicate scavenging, whether it be just finding a dead animal out there and consuming parts of it, or my particular favorite reports are the ones where the hunter has taken the deer and the Bigfoot outruns him to it. And what an economical way to expend energy and get a large food source. The fact is, the same thing happens with other primates. So the fact that they appear to eat some meat is not a problem. And there are also some primates that are active carnivores, where chimpanzees actively hunt for various food items. And we have reports indicating active hunting for deer and other game. We have reports indicating active fishing. We have reports active foraging for grubs, tearing logs apart to get invertebrates, probably some reptiles and amphibians that live in those decomposing logs, all for that necessary protein source. All of that makes sense in primate biology. Some primates actively seek out anthropogenic food sources. Reports indicate foraging in dumpsters, outbuildings for grain, the barn that gets raided, or the shed where the homeowner keeps their several 50-pound bags of feed of various kind, and bags are just turned up missing, and the empty bag is found out in the woods somewhere. I doubt that is the neighbor kid eating that 50-pound bag of dog food. So, this is behavior that's also found in primates. when you think of primates, you really get into a lot of thinking about social behaviors. Most primates form social bonds that create social groups. You know, humans as a primate, we form family bonds, we form various tribal bonds. You know, in my own life, I have my family, I have my neighborhood, I have my working family, the group that I'm with every day, it seems. And it's a natural way of social organization. And the reports really appear that the Bigfoot or other creatures, similar creatures, create small bands that appear to be familial based. A lot of reports are 3 or 4 where there's a large assumed male, a little smaller female, whether they can identify the sex for sure or not. And then a smaller yet, which you can assume being a juvenile. And that's just very, very common in primate biology. Some primates have groups of non-breeding males. We see reports of groups that tend to be not necessarily the largest of the creatures, but well-developed. Many times it's specifically pointed out that they're male, and they tend to be a little, in the reports, shall we say, mischievous. And less than well-behaved. How's that for a description? And that is very common for primates, where some of the baboons and such will have rogue bands of males, young males that haven't established their own family group, that are spending their time finding food and looking for mates and doing all those things, but in the meantime they're getting into trouble. Oftentimes at that human-wildlife interface. And some primates, non-breeding males, are completely solo, constantly seeking a female, and we have lots of reports of that individual male that is out there and tends to be a little bit more territorial. Communication. Most primates use a variety of vocalizations to organize their social groups, maintain territories. The reports, we have all kinds of vocalizations, grunts, growls, screams, whistles. And then we actually have a few animals or reports of actual what appears to be a language. If you get into the Sierra sounds and the like. And actually there's been a select few individual primates that have shown the propensity to utilize formal language. This is probably the most important one as far as I'm concerned. When we talk about the ecology of known animals, we always talk about their conservation status. As an unknown, undescribed species, this creature has no status. If proven to science, and using our assumption from before, what has been reported is accepted as fact, given the apparent wide distribution, given the apparent stable population, it does not seem to be dropping because we get more and more reports. I believe, from a wildlife biologist standpoint, it's highly unlikely this species would be declared as endangered. It's been doing fine, from all appearances, without that declaration, and so I don't see the reasoning why it would be an endangered species. Most likely it'd be designated a species of greatest conservation need, an SGCN species. And an SGCN species, of which we have 1,310 in Texas right now, many of those are put on that list simply because we don't know anything about them. We have some of them that live here in the refuge. We know our resident native wildlife in terms of eastern spotted skunks, swamp rabbits, and things we just know nothing about. So we can't decide whether we have enough of them or too many of them even. So it's kind of a catch-all designation, and I think that's probably where it would end up. Important in this day and age with the SGCN status, we have a thing on the horizon called Recovering America's Wildlife Act, or RAWA. With this goes through at a federal level, it will provide the state of Texas 60 to 65 million, depending on who you're talking to, annually to be used to manage these SGCN species. It's used to provide land acquisition and protection, research, habitat restoration and improvement, education. It runs the gamut. And while we're talking about in theory, up until this slide is reality. And I encourage you to consider this when you see it come down the pike on a ballot. Or encourage your decision makers to support it. Because this is what's going to save the land, that would save this creature should he be proven to exist. Thank you very much.
We have about 5 minutes. If anybody has any questions they'd like to ask?
Yes, sir.
Were the pictures that were on the range and distribution, is that part of the nature center?
Yeah, all those photos were, except for the two assumption, the patty.
The river going towards,
I'm sorry?
the river real narrow is going towards 10 Mile Bridge?
I'm not sure, yes, that one, yeah, that was the channelized stretch, basically from right down here at the bottom of the hill, all the way to, up towards Eagle Mountain.
At one time it was accessible, you just had to kind of work your way through it in a boat.
Oh, you can now?
You still can.
Dang.
What are your thoughts on the possibility of sexual dimorphism playing a role in these sightings of these bipeds allegedly having horns?
I'm going to put on my biologist hat firmly.
Great.
It would be such an anomaly. I mean, yes, you can have weird mutations that pop every once in a while in a species. But if our assumptions up there were correct in terms of being primates, to have any number of individuals that sprouted horns, it's highly, highly unlikely, unless it could be determined that it has some value in providing sustenance, fending off competition, whether that be from within the species or predators, or is it an accoutrement in terms of seeking out a mate? And the last one really sounds very, very unlikely because, you know, unless it has something that biologically it's going to do, it's just adornment. So I really don't see it tying in. So I guess to answer your question, in my mind, some of the add-on details that are reported, not just the horns, but you get into the eyes thing and glowing or shining and all of that.
Right.
Now mine is glowing. I think that gets into the individual that encountered, and hey, I've never had an encounter, but your heart's got to be racing, your mind's got to be going 90 miles an hour. I think there's some misreading.
Could be a case of misidentification.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
I talked to a Pueblo woman in Taos about Sasquatch, and they consider them another tribe. She's this lady. She also mentioned that they had a specific language. And I wish I'd written down what she said, but I also read, I think David Pauletti's, and he's got some books, the guy written about missing 411. He's got a couple books on Sasquatch. Have you seen those?
I have not. I've heard of them.
One of them is Tribal Bigfoot, and I think he mentions probably a northwestern language, like language of the tribe of natives up around the Great Lakes. And some of these Sasquatch allegedly have. Have you heard some of this?
Yeah, I mean, I've heard bits and pieces. It's, you know, have you listened to Ron Moorhead's stuff, the Sierra Sounds? And, you know, that's some weird stuff that I don't have any biological
Is
explanation.
that the one that's camping out in the hill?
With Moorhead is in California in the 70s that he did the
Or was
recordings.
there somebody
They call
more
it the
recent?
samurai chatter.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
Weird, weird language sounding.
They slow that down, and it sounds almost like just a different, it sounds different when they slow it down.
Like a language?
well, the moderator just gave me this sign.
You're being a city. This is the last known sighting or encounter anybody had here?
The last I know of, and it came off the BFRO site, is 1977. Actually, the gentleman that put that report out just commented on Facebook within the past couple days of advertising this event, and he said he was going to be here. I have never met the man, so it's you. Okay. So you're the winner right now for the last one that's been reported to us. When any
I talked to, I don't see Gino, but Gino says in 77 he saw it.
okay.
Also, what was the supervisory name?
In 77, Tom Wood.
Clark.
Oh, Wayne Clark.
Wayne
Yeah.
Clark. And I met a guy named Dennis Barnes, and he also said he saw it. So,
I worked for Wayne Clark for a lot of years, and
I worked with his son. So he wanted to hear the story. I told him, and he says, no, I need to apologize to him.
but it's in terms of what we get told. There's not much activity after dark out here anymore.
I think they're a migration animal, because I have a November 76 sighting in Weatherford,
Mm-hmm.
and then 1 month later was here that I had. So I kind of think it's a migration animal.
Just a very minor point. When you use the word migration, there's a very specific definition to migration. It does not mean movement. It means moving from point A to point B and back to point A.
Yeah, moving. Yeah.
It has to have the return trip. But you're talking from Weatherford to here, 21 miles or so. That could be just the range, home range.
Right.
So I caution the use of the word migration.
Well, also in Oklahoma, I see kind of the same thing.
Mhm.
A lot of sightings in general, you know, from point A to point B.
Mhm. Yeah. From everything I hear about Oklahoma, that's a whole different thing going on up there.
Well, appreciate everybody coming today. And Mr. Redfern will be here at 11 for Gulf Meadow, Texas. If you're interested in that.
I thought you cut me off for lack of time. Does anybody else have any questions?
Time's up.
Yes, sir.
My sister-in-law that lives in Pembroke said there had been sightings of a albino sort of Bigfoot around Lake Pembroke. I mean, it almost sounded like around here. Is there any idea that maybe we're talking about migrating? Maybe makes rounds.
I've heard rumor of those sightings. I've not talked to anybody, specifically with it or anything, so I know no details whatsoever. However, it's similar to what we were talking about with Weatherford. If you have a creature of this size, excuse me, and its caloric intake needs, it's going to cover a lot of ground. I mean, let's face it. If I put if I took my wife and my 3 kids, and which my kids are all adult, but when they were kids at home, if I said, okay, we're moving out to the nature center, we're going to survive out here, survivalist kind of thing, we would be hard pressed to feed ourselves on 3,600 acres without really impacting it to the point everybody knew we were going. So if you apply that same idea to Bigfoot and such, and you have a family band, say 3 or 4, twice our size, assume twice the caloric intake, if they were living here 24/7, 365, that would be exceptionally obvious. The ecology of the refuge would be impacted. So it's only natural to assume they would be heading out all the way to Weatherford, down to Benbrook, Wise County, who knows? There's no barriers that would be sufficient to stop them. Certainly nothing geographically or in natural geography doing it. There's some human things, you know, 199, but hey, even though it's a busy road, there's periods of time where you could cross it without being seen. So I don't think 20, 30 miles is anything to worry about. But, so it could be the same, but it's not migration. It's just movement.